The email pinged on my phone the same day I celebrated 20 years with the company, only to be fired in a blink. My name's David 52, and I've been in business longer than most of my colleagues have been alive. The cold hum of the air conditioner didn't help as I stared at the empty office, my old employee badge still clipped to my jacket. Funny how life works. One minute you're building someone else's dream, the next you're buying it. Ever felt like life took an unexpected turn? Share your thoughts below. I never thought the day would come when I'd have to face Billy like this. My grandson, the boy I'd raised, was standing before me shouting demands that left me speechless. "Get out, Granny." Billy's voice was sharp, filled with a fury that felt foreign, like a stranger was standing in my living room. I couldn't process what he was saying, what he was asking for. He wanted the inheritance, and he wanted it now. The words hit me like a cold gust of wind, piercing through the warmth of the home I had built with my own two hands. I had spent my whole life working, building something for my family. And now here he was, demanding it as though it were owed to him. I stood there frozen, staring at Billy. I had known something had been off with him for a while now. There had been small signs: his absence at family gatherings, the coldness in his voice when we spoke on the phone. But this was something else entirely. "Billy, I don't owe you anything," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I worked for what I have, and I'm not giving it to you just because you demand it." Billy's eyes narrowed. "You think you can keep all of this from me? I deserve it just as much as anyone." It stung more than I cared to admit. This wasn't the boy I had raised. Billy had always been kind, thoughtful, not like this. His voice was full of entitlement, anger, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something dark. I glanced over at the family photo on the mantel, a reminder of happier times. It had been taken on our trip to the coast a few years ago, all of us together smiling. That image now felt like it belonged to someone else. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the more I tried, the more everything seemed to slip further away. Billy wasn't listening. He was too consumed with his anger to hear me. "I'm entitled to this," he spat, "and I'm not leaving without it." The air in the room grew thick, like a storm was about to break. I tried to steady myself, tried to hold my ground, but the weight of his words was suffocating. I had raised him, I had loved him, and now this. Without warning, Billy turned and stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards. The door slammed behind him, echoing through the house. The sound was deafening, and for a moment I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, my heart racing in my chest. I stared at the empty doorway, the silence now filling the space where Billy had stood. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could explain. I looked again at the family photo, the one with all of us smiling, so different from the tension in this room now. I thought about the years I'd spent working for this life, for this family, and now I was faced with a reality I hadn't expected. Time seemed to freeze as I looked at the old clock on the mantel, its brass face tarnished with age. It had been with us for decades, a symbol of stability. But now it felt like it was stuck. The hands no longer moving, as if time itself had stopped for me, for us. Billy's words still echoed in my head. I wanted to scream, to tell him how much he had hurt me, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. My mind was racing, but I was stuck. The anger, the confusion, the hurt, it all blended together, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. I stood there for what felt like hours, the house silent around me. My eyes shifted back to the clock, but I couldn't find the strength to move. What was I supposed to do now? What was left for me? And just then the phone rang. It was Billy's number. My heart skipped a beat. Was he calling to apologize? To explain? I picked up the phone, my hand shaking as I pressed it to my ear. But when I heard his voice on the other end, it was nothing like I expected. It was cold, distant, and angry. "You've made your choice, Grandpa," he said before hanging up without another word. I stood there staring at the phone, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. What had just happened? What had I done wrong? My own grandson had just turned his back on me, and I was left with nothing but confusion and pain. I dropped the phone onto the table, my hands trembling. The shock of it all was overwhelming. Had I lost Billy forever? Was there any chance for us to rebuild what had been broken? The answer I feared was slipping further and further away with each passing second. The phone buzzed again and I stared at Billy's name on the screen. His last email had hit me hard, but it wasn't just the words, it was the demand. My own grandson asking for the inheritance like it was his right. "Get out, Granny," he'd shouted earlier. That moment haunted me, and now the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a tipping point. I couldn't just let him walk all over me. I had worked too hard for everything I had. I was sitting at my desk surrounded by documents, financial statements, tax returns, and notes I'd scribbled to myself over the years. My fingers trembled slightly as I sifted through them. The numbers blurred in front of me. Was it all really going to come down to this? Was I really going to let Billy dictate what happened to everything I'd built? The email from Billy continued to play in my mind. "I need this, Grandpa. You've always supported me. Don't let me down now." He sounded desperate, but what did he really want? What had changed in him to make him so demanding, so entitled? I stared at the email, unable to reply. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, hoping for some distraction. The door opened, and there stood Arthur Fitzgerald, my oldest friend, looking as weathered as I felt. He was retired now, but still the sharpest mind I knew. "You look like you've been fighting with your thoughts, Henry," Arthur said, walking in and sitting down across from me. "I've been trying to figure out what to do about Billy," I said, the words spilling out. "He wants the inheritance, and I don't know what to do. He's not the same boy I raised." Arthur listened quietly, his brow furrowed. After a moment, he leaned forward. "Sometimes, Henry, it's not about what's fair. It's about what's right for you. You've given him everything you could, but he's asking for more than he deserves." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle on me. Billy's demands weren't just about the money, it was deeper. It was about control, about testing my limits. "Maybe it's time to stop trying to fix things that aren't broken," Arthur said gently. "You've given enough. It's time to focus on what's right for you." I let his words sink in. Could I really cut Billy out? Could I stand firm even if it meant losing him? I sat there, silence hanging between us, wondering if I was ready to make that choice. Could I really sever the bond with my own grandson? Or was I just fooling myself by thinking I had any real control? The coffee shop buzzed around me, but my mind was consumed with one thought. I had made my decision. Billy wouldn't get the inheritance. Arthur sat across from me, waiting, his eyes steady. We'd been friends for years, but today I felt the weight of his presence more than ever. "You sure about this, Henry?" he asked, his voice soft. "I'm sure," I replied, staring into my coffee cup. "He's not getting it. Not after everything he's done. He's changed." Arthur nodded slowly. "It's not easy cutting him off, but you've done enough for him. He's grown entitled." I sighed, feeling the heaviness of the choice. "I can't do it, Arthur. I can't let him walk all over me. I've worked too hard for everything I have." Arthur placed a hand on mine, reassuring me. "It's your life. You've got to live it for yourself now, Henry. He needs to learn that respect isn't given, it's earned." That night I called Billy. I could feel the tension in my chest, the fear of what was to come. His voice was sharp when he answered. "Grandpa, I really need this. You can't just leave me out of it," he demanded. I took a deep breath. "I've made my decision. The inheritance isn't yours. You need to understand that nothing in life is given freely." There was silence. Then anger seeped into his words. "You'll regret this. If you don't give me what I'm owed, I'll make sure everything falls apart." The threat sent a chill down my spine, but I stood firm. "I'm not afraid of you, Billy. You've made your choices. I've made mine." The line went dead, and I sat there stunned. What had I just done? I looked at the phone, unsure if I had just lost my grandson for good. But deep down, I knew I had done the right thing. He needed to learn, and I needed peace. The phone rang again, but it wasn't Billy. It was a blocked number. My heart raced as I picked up, bracing for whatever came next. The low murmur of conversation in the coffee shop didn't quite reach me as I sat across from Arthur. I was lost in thought, the weight of the decision pressing down on me more than ever. The bright lights outside illuminated the street, but it felt like darkness had crept into my life. Arthur, always the steady one, sat there quietly watching me, waiting for me to speak. I had made my choice. Billy wasn't getting the inheritance. But that was only the first step. The hardest part was yet to come. I had to figure out what came next. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his weathered face calm. He'd been my friend for years, and today more than ever I needed his wisdom. "Have you decided what you're going to do with the money?" Arthur asked softly, breaking the silence. He knew the choice wasn't just about money. It was about what I valued, what I stood for. I shook my head. "I don't know. I never thought about what comes after this." Arthur paused, giving me space to think. The world outside continued its frantic pace, but here in this quiet corner of the cafe, I was in limbo. Billy's voice, demanding, angry, still echoed in my ears. But today I didn't feel the same fear. I felt something different, a clarity. "You know," Arthur continued, "sometimes the hardest thing to do is let go, but it's also the best thing for you. Billy's your blood, but that doesn't mean you owe him everything." His words were simple, but they struck a chord in me. Arthur had always been the voice of reason, but today, his words carried more weight than usual. I felt as though for the first time I was seeing things clearly. I thought about the money, the house, the years of hard work that had built everything I had. But it didn't matter anymore. I was starting to realize that all that mattered was peace, and I hadn't had that in years. Billy's constant demands had stolen that peace from me. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't need to give him what he wanted. I needed to give myself something better, a chance at peace, a chance to rebuild my life without the weight of expectations. I took a deep breath, setting my coffee cup down. "I've been thinking about it," I said, looking Arthur in the eye. "I'm going to start a charity, a fund to help people, to give back to the community. I don't need this money to control me anymore. I don't need it to control my family. It's time I gave it to something that actually matters." Arthur's face softened with approval, though his eyes reflected a deep understanding of how hard this decision had been. "That's a good choice, Henry. That's the kind of legacy you should leave behind. Something that matters. Something meaningful." The conversation shifted, but I was no longer feeling the weight of the world pressing on me. Instead, for the first time in a long while, I felt lighter. This wasn't just a financial decision. It was a decision about how I wanted to live the rest of my life. Later in my office, I took another look at the photograph on my desk. It was old, faded, but it still held so much meaning for me. A younger version of myself standing with my wife and Billy when he was just a child. We were a family then, no secrets, no betrayal, just love. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the emotional distance that had crept between us over the years. This was a family torn apart by greed and resentment, but it didn't have to be that way anymore. I grabbed the clock from my desk, my hand shaking slightly as I lifted it. The ticking had been a constant reminder of the passage of time, but now it seemed more ominous than ever. The once sturdy frame of the clock was cracked. A sharp line ran down the glass, dividing it. Just like my family, the cracks were there, but now I could see them. The damage had been done, but there was still a chance to fix things, to start again. I set the clock back down, feeling a strange sense of finality wash over me. The decisions I had made today were final. I couldn't go back. Billy called again that evening. I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, but before I could answer, it rang out. His voicemail blinked on the screen. I didn't bother to listen. I already knew what he would say. More demands, more threats. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to bend. Not this time. There was a sense of relief now, though I still couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. I'd spent so many years trying to make everyone happy, Billy, my wife, my family. But I couldn't do it anymore. And I realized with a clarity that had eluded me before that I didn't need to. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for everyone I cared about. The phone buzzed again. This time the text from Billy read, "You made the wrong choice. I'll make sure you regret this." I stared at the words, my pulse quickening, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The doorbell rang with a sharp, jarring sound that pierced the quiet of the house. I hesitated for just a moment, but I knew who it was. Billy. It was always Billy. I had hoped that his persistence would fade, that he'd eventually come to terms with the fact that his demands weren't going to be met. But here he was again. I walked to the door, my hands slightly trembling, but my resolve firm. The decision had been made long ago. He wasn't getting the inheritance. Not now, not ever. And I wouldn't let him use family ties to manipulate me any longer. This was the final confrontation, the last time he'd come to me asking for something that wasn't his. When I opened the door, I was met with the angry glare I had grown all too familiar with. Billy stood there, his hands on his hips, his face twisted with frustration. "I'm not going to keep asking you, Grandpa." Billy said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "You know I need this. You've got enough, and you're just holding it all back. What's wrong with giving me what's mine?" I felt the weight of his words, the pressure mounting inside my chest. But I had made my decision, and no matter how hard he pushed, I couldn't let him win this time. "You don't get to decide what's yours," I replied. My voice steady, but carrying the edge of finality. "You've been demanding and entitled for too long. I've already made my decision. The inheritance goes to charity. It's going to a cause that will help more people than it ever could have helped you." Billy's face contorted with disbelief. He took a step back like my words had physically struck him. "You can't be serious," he said, shaking his head. "After everything, you're going to just throw it all away?" "I've made my choice," I said, my voice resolute. "And nothing you say is going to change that." Billy's eyes blazed with fury. "You're just like everyone else, aren't you? You've always cared more about your damn money than your family, and now you're going to toss me aside like I'm nothing." His words were sharp, biting, filled with anger and betrayal. "I was your flesh and blood, and you're throwing me out. You're no better than a stranger." I stood there, the sting of his words cutting deep, but I didn't flinch. This was what I had to do. "You've chosen this path, Billy. I didn't ask you to make things this way. You've pushed me to this point. I'm not the one who abandoned our family. That was you." Billy's face turned red. His fist clenched at his side as though he might strike out, but instead he just spat. "You'll regret this, old man. You've made your choice, but I'll make sure you feel it. I'll make sure everyone knows just how heartless you really are." The venom in his words hit me, but I stood firm. "Do whatever you want, Billy. The truth is, you're not going to break me. I've made my peace with my decision." For a moment, the tension in the air was thick, as if the very walls of the house were closing in on us. The sound of my heart beating, my breath shallow, was all I could hear. But I knew I couldn't back down. I wouldn't back down. Not now. Billy turned, his movements quick and furious like a whirlwind of anger. You'll see what happens when you turn your back on family," he muttered, stomping down the front steps and out of the door. The door slammed behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood there for a long moment, the silence deafening. The storm had passed. The tension that had gripped me for so long slowly began to lift. I wasn't sure if it was the weight of his departure or the relief of finally standing up to him. But something shifted in me. I was free from the grip of guilt that had shackled me for too long. I walked over to my desk, my fingers brushing lightly over the clock I had placed there earlier. The crack that had run through it for so long was now repaired, the once broken timepiece, now a symbol of what I had done for myself. The family had been broken, yes, but I had made a choice to rebuild, to focus on what really mattered, and I was no longer going to let guilt or Billy hold me back. The clock ticked, each sound louder than the last. With each passing second, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. I had done the right thing. I had faced the truth. And now I could finally move on. I stood there in the quiet aftermath, feeling lighter, more at peace than I had in years. The decision to finally cut ties with Billy was heavy, but it was the right one. I had to do it for my own peace of mind, for my future, and for the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Billy's words echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this, old man." But they no longer held the power they once did. I couldn't afford to let them. And with that, I closed the door on the past, on Billy, on the inheritance, and on everything that had weighed me down for so long. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. There was more to come. The door clicked shut behind Billy with a resounding finality that seemed to echo through the house. His angry footsteps faded away, and the tension that had gripped me for so long began to dissipate. The storm was over. Billy had left, but this time there was no lingering regret, no gnawing sense of guilt. The truth had been laid bare, and with it the chains that had bound me for so long were broken. I stood at the door for a moment, taking in the silence that followed his departure. The house was still, but I wasn't. My heart was racing, but in a way that felt liberating, not suffocating. I had done it. I had made the decision I had been dreading for so long, and it was the right one. There was no more wondering, no more doubting. I had stood firm in the face of pressure, and I had chosen peace. But as the anger and frustration from the confrontation slowly faded, a new feeling began to take its place. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. Instead, there was something else. Something like freedom. It wasn't freedom from Billy or from the past. No, it was deeper than that. It was freedom from the weight of all the expectations I had been carrying, from the idea that I owed anyone, even family, something I couldn't give. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I woke up early, the first light of dawn seeping through the blinds. It felt like the world was starting fresh. And for the first time in years, I was ready to start fresh too. I took my time getting ready, no longer rushing through the motions of the day. I walked into my office, a space that once felt like a battlefield, but now felt like a sanctuary. I sat at my desk, looking out the window, watching the soft morning light reflect off the glass buildings in the distance. There was something calming about the stillness, the quiet before the workday began. As I stared out at the world beyond my office window, I realized something. It wasn't the money or the inheritance or even the family I had lost. It was this. This was what mattered. This moment. The ability to make decisions, to take control of my own life, to build something that had meaning to me. It wasn't about fixing everything that had been broken. Some things, some relationships were beyond repair. But what mattered now was that I was free to make my own choices, and that was enough. I had the power to shape my own future, and I wasn't going to waste it. Later that day, Arthur called. His voice was steady, calm as it always was, and he asked if I wanted to meet up. I agreed, knowing that I needed his perspective more than ever. We met at our usual spot, a small cafe downtown, where we had shared countless conversations over the years. The place was quiet, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, and it felt like the right setting for what I needed to hear. Arthur didn't waste any time. "You've made a big decision, Henry," he said, his voice warm but firm. "But you can't just stop there. There's more ahead of you. You've spent so many years focusing on the wrong things, on Billy, on family obligations, on the past. But now it's time to focus on something else, something that's just for you." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I know," I said quietly. "I don't know why it took me so long to see that. I've been holding on to things that were never mine to keep." Arthur smiled, his eyes twinkling with the same wisdom they always held. "It's never too late to start fresh," he said. "And the good news is you don't have to do it alone. You've still got a lot to offer, Henry. You've got a lifetime of experience, and there are people who could really benefit from it. Maybe it's time you shared that." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I've got a project in mind, something that could help a lot of people, a charity initiative, and I think you'd be the perfect person to lead it." I felt a flicker of interest. It wasn't the kind of thing I had thought about in a long time, but it felt right. "What's the project?" I asked. Arthur leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly as he spoke. "It's a community outreach initiative, a way to give back to those who need it most, a way to make a real difference, Henry. And I think it's exactly what you need right now." I sat back in my chair, taking in his words. I had spent so much time worrying about what I had lost, about the inheritance and the family I felt I had failed, that I hadn't seen the bigger picture. This was my chance to rebuild, to find purpose again, not in the past, but in something new. And the best part? It wasn't about me. It was about helping others, about making a lasting impact on the world around me. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady. "I'll help. Let's do this." I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't just the sense of relief I had been hoping for. It was deeper than that. I was ready to step into the future, no longer bound by the past. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine to walk, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was making the right choice. I knew that I was. But as I reached for my phone, the message that appeared on the screen made my stomach tighten. It was from Billy. "We're not done, Grandpa. You'll regret this." I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. But this time, it didn't faze me. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going back. The crisp autumn air greeted Henry as he walked alone in the park, the sound of crunching leaves beneath his feet grounding him in the moment. It was a peaceful afternoon, but his mind was at ease in a way it hadn't been for years. The silence from Billy's calls told him everything. His decision was made, and for the first time in years, he felt free. Arthur's voice echoed in his mind. "You've done what's best for you, Henry. Don't look back." There was nothing to go back to. The pressure, the demands, it was all gone. Billy's silence was louder than any argument they'd ever had. As he passed a bench, the same one where he and Arthur had spent countless hours talking, Henry paused. He sat down, looking out over the park. The view hadn't changed, but he had. The past was behind him, and the future was his to create. Arthur had been right. The past was something to leave behind. Henry had finally done that. And now, for the first time, he could feel the weight lift off his shoulders. Arthur's words earlier came back. "You can't live in the past. It's time to move forward." And he had. His life would never be the same, but that was all right. Henry smiled to himself as he stood and walked back to his office, feeling lighter with each step. He had started to rebuild. He could finally see things clearly. The people who mattered, those relationships, those were worth nurturing. The rest was irrelevant. As he sat at his desk later, his phone buzzed. He recognized the number immediately. "Billy, you've made a mistake. This isn't over." The message was short, cold. Henry stared at it, but this time it didn't bother him. He deleted it without a second thought. He sat back in his chair, feeling calm. No more distractions, no more demands. For the first time in years, he was in control. Later, as he walked home, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Billy. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. You'll regret this." Henry didn't even bother to read the rest. He put the phone back in his pocket. There was nothing Billy could do anymore. For the first time in a long time, Henry felt a sense of peace as he continued down the path. He wasn't going to turn back. His future was waiting for him, and he was ready to embrace it. The morning sun softly streamed through the windows of the community center as Henry signed the final papers. With each signature, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The decision was done. He had transferred his assets to the charity. Standing beside him, Arthur offered a quiet, approving smile. "This is the right thing," Arthur had said, and now Henry truly believed it. The past few weeks had been difficult, but in this moment there was peace. Henry glanced around the room. Volunteers and staff, many unfamiliar just days ago, were now the heart of a mission that he was proud to support. His small gesture, giving away the wealth he had built, felt like a step toward something much bigger. As he turned toward the window, a sense of calm washed over him. He was free, unburdened by the chaos and anger of the past. Arthur had been right. This was the beginning of a new chapter. Arthur stepped closer, his voice low. "You did it, Henry. You're free now." Henry nodded, a faint smile on his face. "It feels good." His watch long stopped ticked, once again steady and sure. The past no longer had a hold on him. As a child walked up to collect a backpack of donated supplies, Henry watched with a quiet satisfaction. This was why he had made this decision. The child's joy mirrored the peace Henry now felt. He turned back to Arthur. "Yeah, I am." They stepped outside, the cool air filling Henry's lungs as he breathed deeply. The city stretched before him, a future full of possibilities. The past was behind him now, and with it a sense of freedom he had longed for. For the first time in years, Henry was ready to face the future. As Henry stepped outside, the weight of the last few weeks seemed to lift with each breath of the cool autumn air. The broken watch, once a symbol of his fractured past, now ticked steadily in his pocket, a quiet reminder of the peace he had found. It was strange how letting go of the things that once defined him, money control and family ties, had set him free. Sometimes we need to face our toughest moments to realize what truly matters: kindness, community, and the courage to start over. Life, much like the seasons, has a way of offering us second chances if we're willing to take them. What about you? Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Share your thoughts below.